All my life, I believed my mother was the woman who held us together. If my father was the roof, keeping out the storms, my mother was the walls, the foundation, the thing that gave us shape. To me, she wasn't just a parent. She was a symbol, a lesson. She used to whisper a single word into my ear whenever life felt unfair: loyalty. She told me it was the thread that stitched a family together, the promise that kept us alive in a world that would otherwise devour us. I grew up believing that. Blindly. Maybe that's why the story I'm about to tell you still burns inside me. Because it's not just a story about my family. It's a confession. It's a slow unraveling of everything I thought I knew. And maybe as you hear it, you'll find a reflection of yourself. Or maybe you'll walk away haunted, just as I have been for years. My earliest memories are soft. My mother's hands always warm. The smell of bread baking in the kitchen. The sound of her laughter echoing through a small house that seemed too fragile to hold so much joy. She made sacrifices nobody ever acknowledged. My father worked late, often gone until midnight, and yet dinner was always ready, homework always checked, tears always dried. My brother and I would sit around the table, and she would tell us stories, not fairy tales, not make-believe, but family legends. About her father, a strong man who died too young, about her mother, who carried pain silently. She always ended those stories with the same phrase: family comes first. Loyalty comes last. Nothing in between matters. I believed her. I worshipped her. She was my compass. But even compasses can break. And sometimes, they don't point north at all. When I was 10, I noticed the first crack. It wasn't obvious. It never is. My mother had a habit of locking her bedroom door when my father wasn't home. At first, I thought she needed space, privacy. Adults deserve that. But one evening, curiosity got the better of me. I pressed my ear against the door and heard the faint sound of paper tearing, then silence. When she emerged, her hand smelled faintly of smoke. I didn't ask. Children rarely do. We bury questions because we fear the answers. Still, the image haunted me. A mother who preaches loyalty doesn't destroy letters in secret, does she? As years passed, her contradictions grew sharper. In public, she was adored. Neighbors trusted her, friends envied her, my father bragged about her devotion. She smiled with the ease of someone who had nothing to hide. But behind closed doors, shadows lengthened. There were visitors who never stayed long, men with tired eyes and women who spoke in whispers. She introduced them as friends of the family, but their faces never returned. I remember once asking, "Mama, who are they?" Her answer was simple, too simple. People who need my help. Don't ask again. Loyalty, I reminded myself. Don't ask. Don't betray. Even as suspicion grew, so did love. That's the cruelest part of betrayal. It's built on the strongest foundations. My mother could undo all my doubts with a single gesture. When I failed a math test, she stayed up with me until dawn, drawing numbers on napkins, refusing to give up until I understood. When I had my first heartbreak, she held me as if my pain were her own. And when I dreamed of leaving our small town to study abroad, she promised me she'd move mountains to make it possible. So I convinced myself the secrets didn't matter. That whatever she did behind locked doors was irrelevant, because love was enough. I was wrong. On my 16th birthday, my father organized a small gathering at home. Cake, neighbors, the usual. My mother smiled through it all, beaming at me as if I were her greatest achievement. But that night, long after the guests had left and my father had fallen asleep, I crept downstairs for a glass of water. That's when I saw her. She was standing in the living room, phone pressed against her ear, voice sharp, almost venomous. I froze in the hallway, listening. Her words weren't meant for me, but they carved themselves into my memory. No, he doesn't suspect. None of them do. I've waited too long to let it slip now. The tone wasn't maternal, wasn't loving. It was cold, calculating. And in that moment, the world shifted beneath me. I wanted to believe I misheard, that maybe she was rehearsing a line from a play or speaking about something trivial. But then she noticed me. Her face paled, then hardened. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her voice dripping with casual calm. I nodded, too afraid to speak. She ended the call, set the phone down, and kissed my forehead. "Happy birthday again, darling. Don't stay up too late." Then she walked upstairs, leaving me with 1,000 unanswered questions. That was the night loyalty stopped being a gift and started becoming a weapon. I realized then that my mother was not who I thought she was, that the woman who taught me loyalty might have been teaching me obedience instead. And yet, I kept her secret. I didn't tell my father. I didn't tell my brother. I swallowed it whole like poison, because that's what loyalty does. It convinces you that silence is noble, even when it's killing you. Years later, I would learn what that phone call meant. I would discover the truth she fought so hard to bury. But on that night, all I knew was this. The woman who raised me wasn't just my mother. She was something else, something I wasn't ready to face. And I never slept peacefully again. When you live inside a house long enough, you stop noticing the fractures in the walls. The cracks become part of the wallpaper. That was my life during those years. From the outside, my family was picture perfect. My father worked tirelessly, my mother managed everything at home with grace, and I was the daughter who smiled politely and studied hard. But under the surface, those cracks were spreading, fine lines of tension that nobody wanted to acknowledge. And I was the only one who saw them. By 17, I had grown tall enough to look my mother in the eye, but I still couldn't see through her. She was a locked book, a fortress, and every time I thought I found an entry point, she sealed it shut with a smile. I noticed things others didn't. A sudden change in her breathing when the phone rang. The way she'd linger by the window after a conversation, staring at nothing. The bruises on her wrists she claimed came from carrying groceries. My father didn't question her. He loved her too blindly. My brother was too young, too distracted. So it fell to me, the daughter who was always too curious, too observant, to carry the weight of suspicion. There were nights when I felt overwhelming tenderness toward her. She would braid my hair, tell me I was her mirror, her pride. In those moments, I forgot the shadows. I believed the version of her that baked pies for the neighbors and wrote birthday cards with perfect cursive. But then there were nights when her mask slipped. I remember once waking to the sound of muffled crying. I tiptoed down the hall and pressed my ear against her door. Through the wood, I heard her whisper, "I won't forgive. I can't forgive." Her words weren't meant for me. Maybe they weren't meant for anyone. But they carved holes in the faith I had left. It happened on an ordinary Wednesday. I came home from school earlier than usual. My father was at work. My brother was at a friend's. The house was quiet, except for the low murmur of voices in the living room. I froze. One of them was my mother's. The other was a man's. I leaned closer, careful not to be seen. The man's tone was sharp, insistent. "It has to be tonight. You've delayed too long." My mother's voice, calm but unyielding. "No. He'll notice. I need more time." "Time for what?" I peeked around the corner. The man's face was unfamiliar, gaunt, sunken eyes, hands trembling. He shoved an envelope across the table. My mother didn't touch it. She only nodded. When their eyes met, it wasn't romance. It wasn't an affair. It was something darker. Complicity. In that moment, the foundation of my world cracked. Until then, I thought maybe she had secrets, but harmless ones. Maybe she was protecting us from something outside. But what I saw was different. This wasn't protection. This was betrayal. The man left quickly, slipping out the back door like a thief. My mother gathered the envelope, pressed it against her chest, and disappeared into her room. I should have confronted her. I should have demanded answers. But I didn't, because loyalty, her word, her curse, still wrapped around me like chains. That evening at dinner, she was radiant. She laughed at my brother's silly jokes, complimented my father on his work, and asked about my day with genuine warmth. She poured wine for my father, milk for me, and never once let the cracks show. I stared at her across the table, wondering, who are you really? The tension was unbearable. I chewed in silence, tasting ashes in every bite. She noticed, of course. She always noticed. Something wrong, darling? She asked, tilting her head. I shook mine quickly. No, Mama. She smiled, and for a second, I hated her for how perfect she looked. Doubt is poison. It seeps into your veins, corrodes your thoughts, until you can't tell what's real anymore. That's what happened to me. At school, I struggled to focus. I'd stare at my textbooks, but all I saw was the envelope. What was inside it? Money, documents, evidence of something unspeakable. At night, I replayed every conversation, every smile. Was it all a performance? Did she love me, or was I just another piece in her elaborate game? I wanted to tell my father, to confess everything. But then I'd see the way he looked at her, with devotion, with faith, and I couldn't. I couldn't be the one to shatter him. So I chose silence again. The silence ate me alive. I grew colder, more distant. My friends noticed. My teachers noticed. But nobody knew the truth. One evening, I confronted her in the smallest way I could. Do you ever keep secrets from us? I asked, watching her closely. She looked up from her sewing, eyes calm, steady. Of course, darling. Every mother does. Some things are too heavy for children. Her voice was soft, but her meaning was sharp. She was telling me not to dig deeper, not to challenge her authority. And I obeyed, out of fear, out of love, out of loyalty. On my 18th birthday, my friends threw a party for me. It was simple, joyful, filled with laughter. For a few hours, I forgot the shadows. When I came home late that night, my father was asleep on the couch. My mother was in the kitchen, alone, staring at a single candle she had lit on the table. "Happy birthday," she whispered, though the day was already over. There was something in her eyes I couldn't name, regret, perhaps, or guilt. I wanted to ask her the questions that burned inside me, but I didn't. Instead, I blew out the candle, and we sat together in silence. That night, as I lay in bed, I made myself a promise. I would find out the truth. I would uncover the cracks, no matter how deep they ran. What I didn't know was that the truth would not only break me, it would destroy everything. I used to think silence was a weakness, that people who kept quiet had nothing to say, no strength to fight back. But as I grew older, I realized silence can be a weapon. My mother wielded it like a blade, sharp, precise, and always aimed at the heart. Her war wasn't fought with fists or guns. It was fought with whispers, with locked doors, with secrets buried so deep I almost believed they didn't exist. Almost. By the time I turned 19, I was tired of pretending. My questions had grown too heavy to carry alone. One night, while my mother was out and my father asleep, I broke into her room. Her drawer smelled faintly of smoke, like it always had. Inside, I found a stack of envelopes, some torn, some sealed. My hands trembled as I opened one. It wasn't money. It wasn't love letters. It was a document. Legal, stamped, official. The words hit me like ice. Property deed transfer. My father's name was crossed out. My mother's signature replaced it. I didn't understand at first. But as I dug deeper, I found more papers, bank slips, contracts, letters. Piece by piece, a story began to form. She wasn't protecting us. She was dismantling us. My chest ached. My mind screamed. But still, a part of me refused to believe it. I whispered to myself, she must have a reason. There must be an explanation. Because how do you accept that the person who raised you, the one who kissed your wounds and wiped your tears, is also the architect of your family's destruction. I shoved the papers back, too afraid to keep them, too afraid to face what they meant. The next day, I followed her. She said she was going to the market, but instead, she walked 3 blocks in the opposite direction, to an abandoned building at the edge of town. I hid behind a tree, my heart pounding in my throat. Through the broken windows, I saw her meet the same gaunt man from before. Only this time, there were others. 4 men, 1 woman. Their voices rose and fell in waves of anger and strategy. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught fragments. He trusts you, almost done, just 1 push left. And then her voice, patience. If we move too fast, they'll know. He'll know. Who was he? My father. Then came the moment that shattered me. The man asked, and the children? My mother's response was colder than winter. They'll understand one day. Or they won't. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I bit my lip, so hard it bled. My world tilted, and I wanted to scream, to rush inside, to demand how she could speak of us like we were pawns in her game. But I didn't. I stayed hidden, trembling, realizing that the woman who taught me loyalty saw her own children as collateral damage. At home, nothing changed. She cooked dinner, kissed my father's cheek, asked about my studies. She looked me in the eye and called me darling. But now every smile was a lie. Every word dripped with venom I could taste but couldn't prove. I started writing everything down in a secret journal, the documents, the meetings, the words I overheard. I told myself I was building a case, that someday I'd confront her with undeniable evidence. But deep down I knew the truth. I wasn't preparing for war. I was just trying to survive hers. If you're still listening to me now, it means you understand. You understand what it feels like to be trapped in a story you didn't choose, to be torn between loyalty and truth. And maybe that's why I'm sharing this, because stories like mine aren't just personal. They're universal. And if you want to hear the rest, you need to stay with me. Because the hardest part is yet to come. The weeks that followed were unbearable. Every day, I woke wondering if that would be the day the truth came crashing down. My father, oblivious, worked late into the night. My brother, too naive, laughed through his childhood. And my mother, orchestrating everything in silence, smiled as if she hadn't already signed our lives away. I stopped sleeping. My dreams were filled with shadows and whispers. Every creak of the house sounded like betrayal. One evening, I gathered the courage to test her. "Mom," I said softly, "what would you do if you had to choose between loyalty and love?" She looked up from chopping vegetables, her knife gleaming in the light. For a second, I thought she would ignore me. But then she smiled. "Loyalty is love, darling," she said. "And love is loyalty. If anyone tells you otherwise, they're lying." The knife hit the cutting board with a sharp thud. I smiled back, but inside I was screaming. The more I learned, the more dangerous it felt. The papers showed she was moving everything into her name. The house, the savings, even my father's business. The meetings hinted at alliances, debts, revenge. And the whispers I caught when she thought I was asleep, they weren't about survival. They were about retribution. Her war was against my father, against the life they had built together. And we were the battlefield. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I followed her again, deeper this time, into the abandoned building. I crept close enough to hear every word. That's when I heard the name. My father's name. And her voice calm, ruthless, promising them that soon he would fall. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, the truth clawing at me. My mother wasn't just keeping secrets. She was plotting betrayal. And the worst part, I still loved her. I never imagined the day would come when I would see my mother for who she truly was. The woman I had worshipped, the one whose arms had once been my sanctuary, was not the protector I had believed. She was a strategist, a puppeteer, and the architect of our family's undoing. It began with a letter I found hidden under the floorboards of her closet, A letter I wasn't supposed to see. The envelope was thick, official-looking, and addressed to a law firm in the city. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a legal document, signed and notarized, detailing the transfer of every major asset my father owned, his business, our home, bank accounts, directly to her name. The handwriting at the bottom of the page was hers. I read it again and again, hoping my eyes were deceiving me. But they weren't. The betrayal was complete, meticulous, and premeditated. And worse, I realized, she had orchestrated it for years. Every sacrifice, every whispered promise of loyalty, every smile, it was all part of her silent war. I fell to the floor, clutching the letter, and felt something inside me fracture. My world, my understanding of family, my concept of love, all of it shattered. I could see her in every memory differently now. The night she burned letters, the meetings she held in secret, the faint smell of smoke on her hands. Every act that once felt loving now felt like manipulation. And yet, even in this betrayal, I could not bring myself to hate her fully. Because she was my mother. I waited for the right moment. And that moment came one evening, when the house was quiet, my father asleep, my brother at a friend's. I found her in the kitchen, slicing vegetables as if nothing had happened. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling, "I know everything." She didn't flinch. She didn't turn around. She continued chopping. I know about the documents, the meetings, everything you've been planning," I whispered. She paused, knife in midair, then slowly set it down. She turned to face me, her expression calm, almost tender. "You've learned what most children never do," she said softly. "I hoped you wouldn't, but I suppose some truths can't remain buried forever." Her calmness was worse than rage. It was deliberate. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Your father, he was never the man you believed him to be. He destroyed my family before I even met him. I had to protect us. I had to take control. And yes, loyalty demanded sacrifices. You are here because I loved you enough to fight silently for you." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the documents at her, to shake her, to demand why she didn't just leave us alone. But as her words sank in, a strange clarity emerged. This wasn't mindless betrayal. This was revenge. Yes, but also a twisted form of protection. I spent hours in that kitchen that night, listening as she unfolded the story. Years of wrongs committed against her, the subtle manipulations of my father, the betrayals buried in plain sight. She had calculated every move, every smile, every act of love to achieve her plan. And through it all, I realized something horrifying. The woman who had taught me loyalty had also taught me deception. She had shown me how to survive, yes, but at a cost I wasn't ready to pay. I felt anger, fear, grief, and admiration all at once. My chest was a storm. By the end of the night, I understood the full extent of her silent war. Our home, our family, our sense of security, all built on a foundation of calculated moves, hidden agendas, and sacrifices I could barely comprehend. And yet, as I looked at her, I saw not a villain, but a deeply human figure, flawed, driven by pain, and willing to cross lines most could never imagine. I realized that my mother was not evil in the simple way children think adults are. She was complex. She was survival incarnate. I didn't know what to feel. Was I supposed to forgive her? Condemn her? Leave? Stay? The doubt was suffocating. Every memory of her kindness clashed violently with the truth of her actions. How could the same woman who dried my tears also plot our family's destruction? The line between love and manipulation had blurred completely, and I realized something painful. There would be no easy answers. I wept that night, not just for the betrayal, but for the realization that loyalty and love are often entangled with deception. That trust is fragile, and sometimes The people who teach you the most important lessons are the ones who break you in ways you never imagined. I stayed in that kitchen until dawn, watching her sleep, thinking about what it meant to grow up in a house where love and war coexist. This is where my story ends, or at least, where I leave it for you. I cannot undo the past. I cannot change the choices she made, or the silence I maintained. But I can tell you this: loyalty, love, and betrayal are never as simple as they seem. If my story teaches you anything, let it be this: look closely at the people you trust the most. Question, observe, and remember that even those who love you can have reasons you cannot yet understand. And sometimes, surviving the truth is the greatest act of loyalty you can offer to yourself. I still live in that house. I still see her every day. And while some wounds have healed, others will never close. She is my mother, and she is the reason I am both strong and broken. And someday, I will have to decide whether loyalty is worth the cost she has made me pay.